The last Christmas I spent with my husband's family, his mother looked at me across the dinner table and said, in front of 11 people, that she had never understood what Marcus saw in me. She said it pleasantly. That is the part I want you to understand first. She said it in the warm, conversational tone of someone making an observation about the weather, not with malice in her voice, not with anger, but with the specific, practiced ease of a woman who had been saying variations of this thing for 6 years and had long since stopped noticing that it was cruel. The table went quiet for a moment. Marcus looked at his plate. Then his sister laughed, a small, social laugh, the laugh of someone releasing tension, and someone changed the subject, and the dinner continued, and I sat at that table for another 2 hours with my hands in my lap and my face arranged into an expression that I had spent 6 years perfecting: calm, present, unaffected. I was very affected. But I had learned in 6 years of Christmas dinners and Easter lunches and birthday gatherings and Sunday visits that showing it accomplished nothing except to confirm whatever version of me his family had already decided on. So I sat. I finished my dinner. I helped clear the plates, because I always helped clear the plates, because I had spent 6 years trying to earn a place at a table that had decided before I arrived that I didn't belong there. That was the last Christmas. I didn't know it at the time, but it was. I want to tell you about Marcus's family, because you cannot understand the ending without understanding the beginning. The Hargrove family was, by the measures that matter to families like theirs, successful. Marcus's father, Edward, had built a mid-sized construction and property development company over 30 years. It was not a large company, but it was a profitable one, and it had given the family a comfortable life, and more significantly, a sense of identity organized entirely around the business and the man who had built it. Edward was 71 when I married Marcus. He was a large, loud, opinionated man who dominated every room he entered, and who had raised 3 children, Marcus, his older sister Vanessa, and his younger brother Daniel, in the complete certainty that the Hargrove name meant something, and that the people who carried it were a particular kind of people. I was not, in Edward's assessment, a particular kind of person. I had grown up in a working-class family in a small town 4 hours from the city where Marcus had been raised. My father had worked in a factory. My mother had cleaned houses. I had put myself through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, and the specific, grinding determination of someone who understands that education is the only door available to her, and who is not going to let it close. I had a degree in finance. I worked at an investment firm. I was, by any objective measure, a capable and self-sufficient adult. None of this mattered to the Hargroves. What mattered to the Hargroves was where you came from, and I came from the wrong place. Marcus and I met at 29. We married at 31. We were together for 8 years before the end, which means I attended 6 Christmas dinners at the Hargrove house. 6 years of the same table, the same people, the same variations of the same experience. I want to be precise about what those 6 years felt like, because precision matters here. It was not dramatic, that is the first thing. There were no screaming arguments, no direct confrontations, no moments that could be pointed to clearly and named as abuse or cruelty. The Hargroves were too refined for that. What they practiced was something quieter, and in many ways more difficult to defend against: a consistent, low-level exclusion that operated through omission and implication rather than direct action. They forgot to include me in conversations I was sitting in. They referenced family history and family jokes with the specific energy of people performing intimacy for an audience of one who was not part of it. They asked Marcus questions about his life that made no acknowledgement of my presence in it. They complimented his achievements in ways that subtly erased my contribution to them. We had bought our house together, but it was always Marcus's house in family conversation. And then there were the comments. Not constant, not every visit, but regular enough to be a pattern, delivered in the pleasant, offhand manner that makes them impossible to respond to without seeming oversensitive. His mother, Patricia, a small, elegant woman who wore her opinions like jewelry, decoratively and always, was the primary source. She wondered, periodically, whether Marcus wouldn't have been happier with someone from his world. She observed that I seemed to find family gatherings tiring, which was her way of noting that I was not performing warmth enthusiastically enough. She mentioned once that she had always imagined Marcus with someone who shared his background, delivered with a smile that made it sound like a compliment to him rather than a diminishment of me. Vanessa, his older sister, was more direct in her coldness, simply did not engage with me unless required, spoke over me in group conversations, and had a way of looking at me that contained a complete assessment and dismissal in a single glance. Daniel, the younger brother, was the kindest of them, which meant he was occasionally neutral. And Marcus. Marcus loved his family. He loved them in the total, unquestioning way that some people love the place they come from, not because it is perfect, but because it is theirs, because it formed them, because questioning it would require questioning something foundational about himself that he was not prepared to examine. He saw what happened. I know he saw it. He was not oblivious. But seeing it and doing something about it are not the same thing, and Marcus, in 8 years, never did anything about it. He would apologize afterward. In the car on the way home or later that evening, he would say something that acknowledged what happened without fully naming it. He would say his mother didn't mean it the way it sounded. He would say Vanessa was like that with everyone. He would say the family just took time to warm up, which was something he had been saying for 6 years without the warming ever arriving. I accepted these apologies for 6 years. And then I stopped.
The last Christmas happened in December. I have already told you about Patricia's comment across the dinner table. What I haven't told you is what happened after, in the car on the way home. Marcus apologized, as he always did, in the same careful, limited language he always used, acknowledging without naming, softening without addressing. I listened to the whole apology. Then I said, "Marcus, I need you to understand something. I am not going to attend another Hargrove Christmas." He said, "What?" I said, "I am not going to sit at that table again. I have done it for 6 years. I have helped with the dishes and smiled at the comments and driven home with you while you apologized for things you then allowed to happen again. I am done." He said, "You're overreacting." And there it was, the sentence that told me everything I needed to know about whether anything was ever going to change. I said, "I'm not overreacting. I am making a decision. You can attend Christmas with your family. I will not be there." He said other things, about family, about effort, about how I had never really tried to connect with them. I listened to all of it. I did not change my position. What followed was 8 months of a marriage trying to decide if it could survive a boundary. It could not. Not because the boundary was wrong. The boundary was the most reasonable thing I had ever asked for in 8 years, but because Marcus could not, ultimately, choose a version of his life that his family disapproved of. He had been formed by them too completely. Their opinion of his choices was too central to his understanding of himself. We separated in August. The divorce was final by the following spring. It was not acrimonious. We were both too tired for acrimony. It was simply the end of something that had been ending for a long time. I moved into an apartment. I went back to being entirely myself. No family dinners to manage, no apologies to accept, no table to earn a place at. I also, in the 2 years that followed the divorce, did something I had been doing quietly throughout the marriage, but now had the full energy and focus to accelerate. I had been working, alongside my job at the investment firm, on building a small portfolio of property investments. It had started modestly, a single apartment purchased 7 years earlier with my own savings, rented out, managed carefully. By the time the divorce was final, I had 4 properties. In the 2 years after, with my full attention on it and without the emotional weight of the marriage, I built it to 11. I also moved firms, a larger firm, a better position, a significant increase in both responsibility and compensation. I was not doing any of this to prove something to the Hargroves. I want to be clear about that. I was doing it because it was what I had always been doing, building, quietly, with the patient determination of someone who learned early that no one was going to build it for her. The Hargroves were not in my mind, until the phone rang.
Edward Hargrove's construction company had been struggling for 2 years by the time Marcus called me on a Wednesday evening in November. I knew this, not because anyone had told me, but because I worked in finance, and I paid attention, and the Hargroves were not good at hiding the shape of a business in distress. There had been a failed development project, a large residential complex that had gone significantly over budget and behind schedule, the kind of project that can absorb a mid-sized company's reserves if it goes wrong enough. It had gone wrong enough. They needed capital, significant capital, quickly from a source that understood property development and was willing to move fast. I understood property development. I had capital, and I had, through 2 years of quiet work, developed relationships with investors who trusted my judgment and moved when I told them to move. Marcus called me on a Wednesday evening. I was in my apartment, reading, with a glass of wine and the specific contentment of a woman who has built a life she actually likes living in. His name appeared on my phone screen. I looked at it. I thought about 6 Christmas dinners. I thought about Patricia's comment across the table, delivered pleasantly in the warm tone of someone who had long since stopped noticing it was cruel. I thought about Vanessa's look. I thought about 8 years of apologies in cars that changed nothing. I thought about, "You're overreacting." I thought about the woman I had been at that table, hands in her lap, face arranged, spending her energy on earning a place that was never going to be given. I thought about the woman I was now, in my apartment, with my wine, with 11 properties and a position at a firm that valued what I brought to it, and a life that asked nothing of me, except to be in it honestly. I watched my phone light up with his name. I let it ring. He called 3 more times that week. Patricia called once. The first time she had called me directly in 8 years of marriage and 2 years of divorce, which told me everything about the nature of the call before I heard a word of it. I did not answer any of them. On the following Monday, I received an email from Marcus. It was long. It explained the situation with the company. It referenced carefully, and with evident effort, the fact that he knew he had no right to ask. It said his father was not well, which was true, I had heard this, and that the company was what was keeping him going. It asked if we could talk. I read the email twice. Then I replied with 4 sentences. I said I had received his message and understood the situation. I said I wished the family well, genuinely and without reservation. I said I was not in a position to be involved in Hargrove family matters. I said they hoped they found the support they needed. I sent it. Then I closed my laptop and I went back to my evening. I am not telling you this story because I am proud of the phone call I didn't answer. I want to be careful about that. There is a version of this narrative that frames what I did as revenge, as a satisfying, calculated punishment delivered at the moment of maximum impact. That is not what it was. What it was a boundary.
the same boundary I had drawn 2 years earlier in the car on the way home from the last Christmas dinner. I am not going to attend another Hargrove Christmas. I am not going to sit at that table again. I had meant it then. I meant it still. The Hargroves had spent 6 years making clear, in the pleasant, offhand, devastatingly consistent way that they had, that I was not part of their family, that I was not the right kind of person, that my presence was tolerated rather than wanted. I had believed them. When someone tells you consistently who you are to them, the most dignified thing you can do is believe them and act accordingly. I was not their family. I had accepted that. The boundary was not a punishment. It was simply the logical continuation of what they had already established. They had drawn the line 6 years earlier. I was honoring it. The company, as I know, found other investors eventually, smaller amounts, less favorable terms, a longer road than the one that I could have provided. Edward recovered from his health scare. The family is, I believe, still intact. And I am here, in my apartment, with my wine, and my 11 properties, and my life that is entirely, completely, quietly mine. There is something I want to say to every woman who has sat at a table where she was made to feel like a guest in her own life. You do not have to earn your place. Not at their table, not in their family, and not in any room that requires you to spend your energy managing your own diminishment rather than building the life you are actually capable of building. The energy you spend trying to belong somewhere that doesn't want you is energy that belongs to your own life, your own work, your own quiet, patient, unstoppable building. Let them keep their table. Build your own. And when they call, and they will call eventually, because people always call when they need the person they underestimated, you are allowed to look at your phone and make a choice. You are not obligated to answer. You are not obligated to save people who spent years making you feel like you needed saving. You are allowed to let it ring. She doesn't stay silent. She doesn't stay broken. She rises. Sometimes rising looks like a life so full and so entirely yours that when the phone lights up with the name of the person who didn't value you, you feel nothing but the quiet certainty of someone who already knows the answer. Let it ring. Subscribe. New story every week, and every single one of them ends the same way. She rises. Leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from a table that was never really yours? I read every single one.